Although today perhaps not as needed as they once were, watches still at their core were originally designed with utility in mind, in turn informing icons that would later become staples in modern watchmaking. The lineage of these said designs is going to often be traced back to watches intended for military use cases. So in this video, we look at roughly 20 military style watches, or in many of these cases, watches with history of being used by service members from all over the world. So given the variety of needs among service members, we're going to break down this video into 3 distinct parts. First being watches intended for the maritime environment or underwater, then in the air, and finally on land. A few disclaimers right up front: a watch like a G-Shock or even a smartwatch like a Garmin or Apple Watch could be a better option for those that are actually going to see military service. But given this is a channel primarily about analog watches and mechanical watches, we're going to have watches of that type primarily be the focus. Also, please keep in mind that this is our second installment of this series, as around 3 years ago or so, we did another video. So all of the watches featured in this one are going to be net new mentions from that previous video. So if you are interested in seeing more, there's something that's not mentioned here, chances are it was mentioned in the previous one, but you could probably do many different installments of this series in the future. And finally, I have no military background, but I have tremendous respect for men and women who are brave enough and disciplined enough, honestly, to serve. So I also welcome anybody out there who has served to offer up recommendations that they would say that would be great for this style of video, or ones that you've personally owned and worn for years. I just bring this up because personally, as somebody who's not served, it does sometimes feel a little bit weird to talk about this. Very passionate about watches. Now, this is an interesting topic for me too, but I just want to show respect for people that actually have been disciplined enough and brave enough to do these type of things. And one final thing, in addition to our list here today, if you want even more military watches or military-inspired designs, check out the curated collection in the description down below on teddybaldassarre.com. Also, if you decide to purchase any of the watches in this collection in the next week, you get 2 free NATO straps with your purchase. This is only eligible for the next week. In that collection, you'll find a similar format as this video, but in addition to many of the picks here, you'll have field watches for land, pilot designs, and divers from a variety of brands and nations, and occupying a variety of price points. Check out the link in the description to see more. And now to kick us off, we look at the C category. This one's pretty self-explanatory. You're looking for durability, legibility, water resistance, all in one package. So to kick us off, I am going to be mentioning a G-Shock because honestly, when doing a video like this, it makes a ton of sense, and I think it's an appropriate recommendation. Here we have the G-Shock. This is the GWM 5610. So this is a watch we recently did a full review on, and I would say for both this context, but also for pretty much any enthusiast out there, if you have interest in a G-Shock, this one should be at the top of your list for consideration. It's not gonna work for everybody, but it does a lot of things right. One, it has a very wearable case, and I just find this watch wears close to a 40.5 to 41 millimeter case on wrist, and there's something to be said about a G-Shock. You put it on, you see what its intended use case should be and is, then you start to give it even more of a pass on its wearability. I think this is one of the most universally wearable G-Shocks on the market. But what goes along with this is you have radio-controlled timekeeping, as well as all the additional features and solar-powered watch to go along with it. So you're getting the quartz oscillation with the accuracy, not having a traditional battery, ultra-accurate watch as well that you don't have to set all the time, 200 meters of water resistance. This one just checks off the boxes in a variety of ways. And did I mention, it's $150. Next up, a brand and a watch with a ton of credibility when it comes to dive watches. Here we have the Citizen ProMaster dive watch. This is the Fugu edition. So this is a watch that has been around since 1989, but was updated in 2018. It was brought to the US market in 2022, and is probably one of the most legitimate dive watches for under $500. If you would look at what many professional divers would utilize, chances are a Citizen dive watch is at the top of the list for a choice under $1,000. This watch comes with a 44 millimeter case, thickness of 12.5 millimeters, lug to lug of 50 millimeters, so a little bit longer than what you'll get from a comparable Seiko, for example, but still delivering on the functionality, legibility. In some cases, I even find Citizen's loom to outdo Seiko. It's very close, both are exceptional. 200 meters of water resistance. This is an ISO compliant dive watch as well. Automatic Miyota 8204 on the inside, sapphire crystal, which is a nice upgrade compared to some of the other entry-level dive watches that might have mineral glass on them. This is a watch with legitimate background, legitimate pedigree when it comes to dive watch design, as well as functionality. Speaking of, we cannot go much farther without mentioning a watch from this brand. Here we have Seiko with their Prospex SRPE 93. This is a traditional turtle that is going to work in a variety of different scenarios. The case is iconic. It's been used by military personnel in the past with this kind of silhouette and design. ISO compliant dive watch, delivers on 200 meters of water resistance, 45 millimeter case, 13.3 millimeters in thickness, lug to lug of 46.9 millimeters, where it's much smaller than its case size. This thing on my wrist even looks phenomenal. Automatic 4R36 movement on the inside, Hardlex glass on top. Really looking back to the legendary turtle DNA, the 6309, also the 6309 famously used by US Navy SEAL teams in the 1970s and 80s. And nowadays this watch even stands out more because of the discontinuation of the SKX. This serves as that entry-level option for a professional dive watch from Seiko, along with a few others of course, but this is one that is so important to their history. Another Seiko we'll throw in here is the Seiko Prospex Arnie. This is the SNJ025. I've talked about this watch a lot on this channel. Now we have the whole background with Arnold Schwarzenegger, worn in Predator. You see that, and that just will create all this interest in this watch compared to many others out there. It's very weird though. It's not a watch that you're going to look at on the surface and be like, okay, that's just a straightforward design like the turtle, makes sense, I'm familiar with it. This has this plastic shroud on the outside. It's an analog digital display. The time setting's a little bit different, but the functionality is there, and I love the way that you can set the hands and how the analog and the digital display work with one another to create this cohesive environment and watch that just comes together to be unlike pretty much anything else under $1,000. It's a 47.8 millimeter case, but this wears, again, much smaller. I could pull this off, no question. I think many others can as well. 13.8 millimeters for its thickness, lug to lug of 50 millimeters. You have this wired lug design on these, but I think it looks great when all combined together. 200 meters of water resistance, ISO compliant dive watch to go along with it. Along with being popular with Arnold Schwarzenegger, it was also seen on the wrist with US Navy SEALs in the past, the US AF teams, and I think that is a testament to its durability and its approach with this design. For our next piece here, this is one that's pretty underrated when you're looking at its history. This is the Squale 1521 Ocean. This is the COSC version. You can get a non-COSC certified version for less, but this one is going to be a bit more buttoned up in its presentation and getting that certified movement on the inside. So Squale, this is a brand that was famous for a variety of reasons. One is you have this history of being used by the Italian Navy with the Marine Militare, but also deserves a lot of credit because they were producing cases for many brands that were also producing watches for military use. Probably most famously, you had Blancpain as an example. But these cases that they were producing extend to brands like Doxa, Hoyer, and others. Looking at the watch itself now, 42 millimeters for its case size, 13 millimeters in thickness, 48.5 millimeters for the lug-to-lug distance, 500 meters of water resistance, automatic Sellita SW200 on the inside. You can get the COSC version as well, and a sapphire crystal on top. So this is a name here that you may have seen from time to time. This is Tornek Rayville. So this is not the original Tornek Rayville. This is a revived brand from Mark II, a micro brand that's been around for over 20 years now and has now really developed this brand to stand alone and bring back a lot of military issued dive watches primarily, so that you can really get this new modern package in some of these designs that really have laid dormant for decades. So just some quick context on Tornek Rayville, where this name is going to be intertwined mostly is with Blancpain with the 50 Fathoms. The naming of these watches were done so that the watches could be issued to US Navy SEALs and work around the Buy America Act that made it difficult for foreign watchmakers to supply US military units. This name and connection comes from the distributor of Blancpain at the time when this was happening, but this is really what set the standard and really the whole mystique around the Tornek Rayville name. Now this version that we're looking at here is known as the Blackjack. So this is inspired by a rare Stocker and Yale Type 6 Sandy 660 that was issued to Special Operation Forces in the late 1990s. Case is 42.5 millimeters, thickness of 13.2 millimeters, lug to lug of 49 millimeters, 200 meters of water resistance, Seiko caliber on the inside, and a sapphire crystal on top. This is one of those instances where you can get a taste of a military issued watch without having to go for these, examples from the past that probably have seen better days. Yes, there's a lot of wear and tear and love on them, but finding one that's legitimate, a lot easier said than done. So to have brands like this, I think is pretty cool for enthusiasts to be able to dive into. So next up, we have the Tudor Pelagos Fix Black. This will be the last within the C type of category here for this video. So this is a newer version of the Tudor Pelagos, following the fixed DNA with its fixed lugs that will only allow for pull-through style straps. 42mm case, titanium at that, thickness of 12.6 millimeters, lug to lug of 51.4 millimeters. Don't get scared though, this watch wears smaller than that lug to lug dimension, especially given that the pull-through straps are going to hide the fixed lugs, or at least most of them, so you will not see the full extension of that when you put this on the wrist. Water resistance of 200 meters and an automatic Tudor MT caliber. This is the 5602 on the inside here with a sapphire crystal on top. In many forms, the Pelagos is going to be the modern watch that I think of when thinking about this military background from the brand. If Tudor today was still supplying military style watches, these would be the watches that would be the angle, not the Black Bay. The Black Bay, yes, is paying reverence to the past, but these are the watches that feel modern while also thinking about where the history of this brand comes from. Tudor's connection to US Navy SEALs, the Marine Nationale, that history is all there, and now you're getting a watch that on the wrist feels as good as any for its price range. Now we move along to the air category. So this is a bit harder to pin down what makes a pilot's watch work for military context. We're definitely going to be looking for low pressure resistance, extreme legibility, and maybe a second or third time zone tracking feature if we can. Also, considering most military pilots, at least in the United States where I'm from, are officers, we can be addressing a little bit more some higher price points here compared to some of the others. So first up, we have a watch from the Canadian brand, Swiss-made watches, Marathon, with their Pilot's Navigator, this time in steel. So this was originally a watch that was available in more of a composite case. Now in stainless steel, I think makes it a completely different package. This version here, 41mm case, 10.8 millimeters for its thickness, and a lug to lug of 47.9 millimeters. This is a very distinctly shaped watch. You have more of this cushion style design on the crown side especially, and that's going to help protect that crown. With steel, it is really a sharp looking watch. Also with steel, you're getting 100 meters of water resistance, which is a great upgrade compared to the more attainable version. And the movement on the inside is the ETA F06.412. This is a high accuracy quartz movement. Sapphire crystal on top. And this was originally designed in response to a request from the Kelly Air Force Base in Texas in 1986, who wanted a low pressure resistant watch for their pilots and air crews. So plus or minus 10 seconds a year for the movement on the inside. You also have a brand new white dial, or what Marathon calls their Arctic dial variant, which I think looks killer in this case. And these were watches that were originally developed with this military use case, and in addition to that, really were going to be only available in military contracts solely until becoming available to the broader market. So next up, we have the Longines Spirit Zulu Time. So the Zulu Time is a watch that dates back, and the word Zulu, of course, has a lot of connection to military and armed forces. This watch was originally developed in 1925, or the original Zulu. It looks very different than the watch you see here today. However, that watch at the time of 1925, think about what is going on in the world of watchmaking, and then think about what this watch did. It was the first wristwatch with dual time zone functionality. That is remarkable. We always think about the 1950s when talking about GMTs and things of that sort. This is a quarter century before that was even happening in 1925. So the history here is probably not considered enough for what this watch was when it was initially unveiled. And then when it comes to Longines and their military background, when it comes to aviation, as strong as any in the world of watchmaking. You have a 39mm option or a 42mm option. Those are going to drastically change how they wear on the wrist. Great water resistance, and you're also getting a true GMT, flying GMT function with that L844.4 caliber. COSC certified SI hairspring on the inside, all the bells and whistles in a package that's hard to beat for $3,000. Next up is another GMT watch, similar price range, with the Oris Pro Pilot GMT. So this comes from their Pro Pilot collection. Their Pro Pilot series is an extension off of their Big Crown family of watches. This is a newer creation in the last year, 41.5mm for its case size. I would say it wears about to that case size, if not smaller. Water resistance of 100 meters, and you're getting GMT function. And I also like how this one has a pulsation scale on the outside. I know some people might not like that, but I like changing it up with different scales on the bezel. I think we get very caught up into time-elapsed bezels, GMT bezels. This isn't maybe as useful as those, but it is cool and differentiating from many other GMTs out there. The red dial, so striking to look at, the legibility is there, and the case I think feels amazing in the hands and on the wrist. Now moving along to two watches from a brand that I would say, when talking about military background for pilots watches, as strong as any. Here first we have the Mark 20 from IWC. So this watch is a newer refresh in the past year and a half from IWC. So we have a 40 millimeter case, 10.9 millimeters in thickness, and a 49 millimeter lug to lug. This is the follow-up to the Mark 18. We skipped 19, now we're at 20. But I think they made this watch so much better with this transition. So you're gonna get a more compact case on the wrist, but also on the inside, you have the IWC 32111 caliber. So this is a 5-day power reserve movement. And with that, while coming in a very similar price range, it's not much more than the Mark 18, great package and a timeless design. So for aviation heritage, IWC again, as rich as any. 1936, IWC unveiled their reference 434. This was the special pilot's watch. And then shortly after, they started to create their Flieger style watches for World War II, and also in the 1940s producing their Mark 11 series for the RAF. And that really set the tone for the Mark series that have become very collectible and beloved by collectors for a long period of time. The other watch that basically extends off of this Flieger DNA, but then combines it with a chronograph, is their pilot's watch chronograph at 41 millimeters. 41 millimeter case, 14.6 millimeters for its thickness, and a lug to lug of 51.8 millimeters. Not the smallest of watches out there. It's not as large as something like the Big Pilot, but certainly a watch that's going to be probably better suited for medium to larger wrists. 100 meters of water resistance, and then the automatic IWC 69385 on the inside. Classic legibility, classic design style. 46-hour power reserve with a column wheel on the inside, and probably one of the chronographs that maybe doesn't get mentioned as much, under around $10,000. And then for the final pilot watch here, we have the Breitling Chronomat B01. So the Chronomat is a watch that has grown on me a lot. When first looking at the Chronomat, it's so strange, honestly. It's a weird watch. You look at the bullet bracelet, you look at the ridges on the bezel, the crown design. It's a goofy watch in many ways. But then you start to think about what makes a watch unique and what makes a watch make an impression. And those are the type of features you're looking for. There are so many watches that will have a little bit of a different design within it and maybe be pulling from so many different places. The Chronomat is 100% its own thing, and that's something that I think we can respect. The Chronomat name also dates back to the 1940s, though its understood form in modern watchmaking can be more directly traced to 1984. Breitling recently reintroduced the Chronomat in the last few years, has its large onion-style crown, the bullet bracelet, the B01 caliber, which I would say is one of the best chronograph calibers you're going to find on the market, under $10,000. Also, the watch from the 1980s was designed with the direct input from the Italian Air Force, the aerobatic demonstration team. Those rider tabs that you see on the bezel, which are a big part of the design, were placed strategically at the quarter hours that were designed for easily being gripped for the wearer, especially when you're in flight. And then for the final category, we have land. So this is a good, proper infantry watch that also could have great durability. Shock resistance is also a nice thing to see here. And if we can get some water resistance, that's great as well. So now for our first watch here in this category is the Casio F91W. So does this watch have the same issuing pedigree to armed forces? No, but is it a watch beloved by these same people? Absolutely, and it extends way beyond that. The Casio F91W is the best watch I think you can get for, say, around $10 to $20, whatever these things cost nowadays. It's all ludicrous just to even say that out loud, say watch and that amount of money in the same sentence. Now, it's a small piece. It's 33.5 millimeters with its diameter and a 37.5 millimeter lug to lug. Thickness is also there, 8.5 millimeters. You are only getting 30 meters of water resistance, but I have seen video after video of these watches going down to these extreme depths. Not saying that you have to go and test it out yourself, and I'm not saying that it has better water resistance necessarily. I'll let Casio fight this battle on their own, but I'll just say I've seen some places where these things can take such a beating and go so deep under the surface on water and withstand this crazy amount of pressure. Resin case, cheapest watch that you're probably going to find that still gets you kudos. And I think the reason why you'll see this in some military contexts is just because they are disposable watches. You can beat them like hell and they still will work. And you don't have to worry about them, unlike many other watches out there on the market. Next, we have Marathon's Officer Mechanical Steel. So this is their general purpose style watch for the field watch context. Case diameter 36 millimeters, thickness of 11 millimeters, lug to lug of 44 millimeters. Now there are some different options you have within their field catalog that you can get lost in. So different case sizes to choose from. Sapphire crystal on these. Also, I forgot to mention earlier, but I'll mention it here now. We've mentioned Marathon, one of the very few brands that use tritium compared to Superluminova, which you'll see most places nowadays. And we talked about the aviation side of Marathon's history, but Marathon actually dates back to 1941 in issuing military watches for the Allied forces. Canadian brand, produces their watches in Switzerland. Probably some of the most background when it comes to producing military watches in all of watchmaking for a brand of this size especially. Small independent brand, and I think for the people that know, they know. I always love wearing my Marathon GSAR, and they're just a watch that gets attention despite never drawing attention the way that you typically would associate when wearing a watch. Next, we look at a field design. This is from Seiko 5, which is for some people maybe a little bit weird to mention it, but I think this absolutely works. This is the new Seiko 5 GMT. These are the SSK023 and the SSK025. So two different case options for at least the finish on them. 39.4 millimeters for that diameter, 13.6 millimeters in its thickness, lug to lug of 47.9 millimeters, water resistance, you're getting 100 meters, automatic 4R34 movement. This is Seiko's in-house GMT movement, really setting the stage in a new world for what a mechanical GMT movement can be available at. Now finding these well under $500. Pretty remarkable value. And these are also coming below the original price of the SSK001, 003, and that whole group. Moving along to our next watch here, we have Hamilton. This is a new watch from Hamilton though. This is the Khaki Field Expedition, 37 millimeters. You also have a larger case option to choose from. So Hamilton, when it comes to, we're talking about this history of field watch design, you could argue Hamilton has the most robust and most widespreading history of any brand in producing military field watches. When thinking about field watches, the first watch that comes to mind is a Hamilton Khaki Field. Just me, I might be slightly biased because I see them a lot, but I don't think I'd get much pushback for saying that out loud. This was a new 2023 release in the fall of last year in September. The dial is going to look very familiar. This is a watch that has been in circulation for many years, has some slight changes to the handset and some of the other features of the dial, but at its core, you can tell this is a Hamilton Khaki Field. Where it's different, has a rotating bezel on the outside. It's a compass bezel, automatic C07.611 on the inside, 100 meters of water resistance, so delivering there, and comes from this background of Hamilton field watch design that is as widespreading as any. Hamilton, when they were producing watches during World War II, halted production of general consumer watches just so that they could produce more watches for the military. Now, Hamilton was not the only brand to be producing watches for the US military during World War II, but they were one of the brands that have to be at the top of the list and getting their kudos for doing so and really setting a standard for what many people nowadays even consider to be a field watch. And then for our final watch, we have the Tudor Ranger. So this is a piece that 39 millimeters, very wearable, follows a familiar format and comes from the Rolex Tudor organization with starting prices under $3,000 on a strap. To me, that's enough to make it pretty unique, and it follows this traditional field watch, explorer watch DNA that is hard to beat and as timeless as you're going to come across in this industry. Automatic MT caliber on the inside, making this also one of the entry points for getting into the Tudor manufactured calibers, 70-hour power reserve to go along with it. Released in 2022. We did have the former Heritage Ranger from years ago that was discontinued. This now moves it into a smaller case size with that 39 millimeter case format. Very robust, time only. It's not going to have the same maybe luxury level of presentation as some of the other watches from Tudor, but I don't think that's the reason why somebody is going to be looking at this watch in the first place. They're going to be looking at it for its durability, robustness, legibility, and being at that entry point for Tudor in the grand scheme of their collection for their MT calibers on the inside. But all right, guys, that's our video here today looking at military style watches. Again, if there are some other watches that you didn't think got mentioned, please leave some comments down below. If you are someone with a military background, love to hear your take in the comments there. I know other people would appreciate it as well. Also, if you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, hit the bell icon. Really do appreciate that. It does help out the channel. Also, check out TeddyBaldassarre.com, full authorized dealer of over 35 brands, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, and a full factory warranty for all the products that we offer. Also, how we're able to fund all of our productions here is through selling watches. So if you are in the market for a watch, we'd love to have your business. Allows us to keep doing what we're doing here, and we love what we do. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.